Welcome to another episode of Neowolf News. I'm your host, Neowolf. Have you ever had a life experience that you knew was a life-changing experience? And once you had this experience, that you realized that this was a date with destiny, that you potentially could have avoided had you listened to warning signs and omens that could have helped to prevent this outcome from happening? In this episode, I'm going to revisit a story that I brought up in episode 5 when I mentioned that there was a time that a couple friends and I were walking out to a bar and that we got jumped and attacked in the streets and that we had to fight and run for our lives. So let's get right into this. This story starts around the end of 2005 when I had gotten a job with my college friend working for a manufacturing company in New Prague, Minnesota. And I was still living in Coon Rapids at the time, still hanging out with my same friends that I was playing softball with and partying, going out to the bars all the time, doing a lot of drinking. And it was around this time that I started to have a reoccurring dream about being in a fight, which was really unusual for me because I had never been in a fight and I was definitely not a violent person. And I recall that this dream, I would feel that sense of anger, like I wanted to hit the person that I was trying to fight against. And every time that I tried to throw that punch, it always felt like it was so weak. And every time I would wake up, I would realize that I'd had that same fight dream again. And after a while, I started to wonder, this is a recurring dream that I have had over and over again. This must be trying to warn me about some potential outcome if I don't make a change in my life. And that made a lot of sense because I was trying to step up as a person in my family, be a man that was responsible for taking care of some of my dad's business, and that I had had discussions with my uncle, and that I knew that I was more focused on going out with my friends and partying and didn't want to step up and take that kind of responsibility. But I knew that it was time that I needed to be doing that. And so it was in spring of 2006 that my friend and I moved to Shakopee, south of the Twin Cities, so that our commute to work was easier. And I was still continuing the same lifestyle. I was going out to the bars and drinking a lot and continuing to have my friends come back down to visit me on weekends or every other weekend. And it got to be around 4th of July, and I remember that we went out to the horse track and we were having a great day and got home, and we didn't want the fun to end, so that we decided that we were going to go downtown and go to the bars. And so I remember it was dark out when we started to walk, and so we went down Marshall Avenue and we took a left and we went onto 4th Street, and we were just zigzagging the streets working our way towards the railroad tracks. And we got to the street by the tracks and we took a left, and there was 3 guys that came out and greeted us at the street, and they invited us to come and join them at their party. And right away I felt uneasy about the situation because I felt like when we were walking down the street that there was a lot more people at this party than just these 3 people. And so I just politely said, no thanks, we're going to go on to the bar. And, being friendly, I asked if they wanted to join us, but they said that they didn't care to. And so we continued on walking down the street, and we got maybe a block or 2 down, and all of a sudden we heard all these footsteps come running up behind us. And before we knew it, we were surrounded by a whole bunch of people. It was maybe like a dozen people to the 3 of us. And I remember right away, this moment got really surreal for me. Like, my alcohol buzz wore off right away, and I got into the zone and got that tunnel vision. And I remember I was backing up and just observing what was happening and kind of staying ahead of the crowd. And these guys were trying to ask us for money. They were telling us we had to pay a toll or a fee to go across the railroad tracks. And we didn't feel like we wanted to lose money or lose anything in this experience. So, we were telling them, no, that's not right. And the tension was starting to rise. Like, these guys were starting to trip and push and like try to take my friend's hat. And I could just tell that, if we didn't do something, that this was going to get really bad because they had us outnumbered and they'd be able to do whatever they wanted to do. So in that moment, I decided that I had to make the first move. And so without much hesitation, I just took the first punch, the first person I could see. It was just a quick jab, and then I moved and I took and I went after the person in the middle, which was the biggest guy, and I hit him as hard as I could. And I can remember I was looking and trying to divide and make as much chaos as I could to bring as much attention to myself as I could. So I turned and I looked for more confrontation, and the next two people I saw were holding rocks, and they were ready to throw rocks at me. So that's when I decided to turn and I decided to run and try to get as many of them to chase me as I could. And so I went towards the tracks, and I can remember I felt like a deer, that I just felt like I was really graceful in jumping up onto the rocks and up and over the tracks. And then it was behind this building. It was a long warehouse building with all these loading docks. So I ran along the back of the building, and I could tell that people were following me, but I knew I was gaining ground on them. So I thought I'd try to get to the corner and get around the corner and just take them one at a time as they came. But once I got to the corner, I could see that I had gotten out to the main street and that across the street was a bar. So I ran over to the bar and I got the bouncer to call the cops. And so while he was calling the cops, I went back to try to find my friends, and one of them had came out like by that time already. And so we went and looked for my other friend, and he, within a couple minutes, came out, and we were all lucky. You know, we'd gotten kind of punched and beat up a little bit, but as far as losses, my one friend lost his wallet with very little cash in it, and that was really all the injury and loss that we had that night. So we were really fortunate. But after that happened, that was really hard to reflect and to realize that I had had those dreams, and that I knew that I could have made lifestyle changes that could have avoided that altogether, and that I had led my friends into that experience, that I felt responsible for getting us into the situation in the first place. And I felt bad that we had to fight and that I had to hit people. Like, I never wanted anything like that to happen. And, you know, I know that I've had head injuries, and, you know, learning from that, that I know that it is possible to hit your head right. So the only thing that I can hope is that if I hit somebody hard, that hopefully it knocks some sense into them and that change their life in a better way. And I know that experience taught us all our own unique lessons. And I know for me that that was the source and the inspiration that gave me the desire to go out camping and getting outdoors more and going on my solo travels. It gave me a lot of courage and confidence to do that. So I look back at that experience as an important time that got me to where I am today. So if you like content like this, you can follow us on social media at NeoWolf News. I'm on Brighteon, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, as well as Gab, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for tuning in for another episode, and I'll see you again soon.